Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to attend this webinar on the Party Wall Act, brick by brick. We're going to go through, try and go through very detailed training on the Party Wall Act. The reason we're doing it across 3 days is to give everyone a break and time to absorb the material and try and do it in bite-sized chunks. And I'm going to go through some of the common questions that we get. Let's do a quick housekeeping, right? So this is the first real life webinar I've done, and hopefully you'll forgive me if I make a few, if my attention is on the wrong screen at the wrong time. But we've done a few practice runs, so hopefully we've ironed out most of the issues. Okay. So quick housekeeping. So this is a Zoom webinar. It's not a Zoom call that some of you you may have done. So we don't have a chat facility on this one, but this has other things. And I'm going to go through some of their housekeeping stuff there. So just be mindful of the difference. Sorry, I was just trying to turn off my phone. Okay, sorry. Yeah, this is a Zoom webinar. It's not a call, so there's going to be some differences there. There's no scheduled fire alarm, so if you hear a fire alarm, it's the real thing. And unfortunately, I can't tell you where your exits are. Mine is over here. So if you make sure you know your exits and run. So if you're viewing this webinar on a phone, you'll see this as an option, and when you touch your bottom of your screen, these will come up. So that's for unmuting your audio when we have questions. There's a raised hand function there, so if you press that, that'll raise hands. We'll practice that in a minute, and you'll also see the Q&A bit right in the corner. Actually, I'm going to turn on this pointer thing. So let me get this on there. Okay, hang on, wrong one. So, okay. So hopefully you'll see this icon for questions and answers. So if you press on that, that'll allow you to feed a question in. Should you get an incoming call, if you're on your phone watching this webinar and you rejoin, your audio will cut out. So what you'll need to do is come out and rejoin back in, and that means your audio comes back in. If you could please mute your call while I'm going through the training, and because there's background noise and it's going to disturb the other participants. So hopefully that shouldn't be an issue. While doing one of our practice runs, we lost internet connection. If that happens, we have got a backup internet. It'll take us a minute or two to get back on. So please stay with us. And if the backup goes down, well, we're going to have to reschedule that. So hopefully that won't happen. It hasn't happened so far. If you get disconnected while you're on your phone, or you lose Wi-Fi, Zoom does automatically connect you as soon as you get a connection. Question on recordings. Yes, there will be recordings available. It'll be on some of our sponsor site, and also it'll be on our YouTube channel, 1996 Party Wall. We will tidy it up a bit, cut out the chunks that are superfluous bits. So we'll tidy it up and put it on our YouTube channel. It'll be on there, so I'm not sure what the timings are, so keep watching that. There will be a Q&A session at the end of each day. I'll try and address the questions on there, and this is where the raise hand comes in. But if you think of questions as you're going along, please put those in, so it saves you having to it saves you sort of having to remember them, and then at the end of each day we'll try to just address as many as I can. last year I bought out a book, This Is It, and it's currently on Amazon, but please don't buy it because it's going to be revised under this lockdown, and these training sessions will give you more information. So I'm actually asking you not to buy it. Save your money basically, and go through these training sessions. So at the end of the three, there will be a little gift for you, for everyone attending the webinar. It's actually on my LinkedIn. It's a draft of DIY notices, but to get more value out of it, it'll be good for you to attend these webinars so that you can you'll understand more of how everything works on that little document. Okay, so day one today, we're going to go through the Party Wall Act on the building owner's perspective, a process overview. We'll have a short break and a couple of messages from very good sponsors. We're very lucky to get hold of these guys. After that, we'll have another 2 sections, one on adjoining owner responses and then common types of work. We'll go through a little section on question and answers, and don't worry, so what we're trying to do is build up the frame of reference on each day, and hopefully some of your questions will get answered as we go along. If they don't, we'll address them on the last day. And we're looking at doing a question and answer webinars only on the Party Wall Act. So there's plenty of scope for answering your questions. Day 2, we're going to look at what happens when you don't receive a reply to your Party Wall notices. This is quite important because it's quite misunderstood in terms of what you should do and what the correct procedure is. Also, on day 2, we'll be looking at another misconception, which is surveyor's fees, who pays and why. Again, we'll have a brief message from our sponsors. The last 2 sections on day 2 will be section 6. This applies to rear extensions, and section 1 of the Act. It sometimes applies to rear extensions, but this is the most useful part of the Party Wall Act, in that it gives building owners rights to go on adjoining owners' land. So that's very important. And again, it's one of these things that's misunderstood, and it can be very useful when doing developments. Again, we'll have a question and answer section. On day 3, we're going to go through loft conversions and chimney removals. These are section 2 works. Chimney removals are really important. This is a super misunderstood element, in that people don't understand that it's notifiable under the Act, and it's one of the most risky parts of a project you can undertake. So please try and make time and attend that one. And we're going to go through porches and basements. Also, we're going to try and put in a section for architects and how they can improve their process in terms of dealing with the Party Wall Act. So that'll be on day 3. Again, questions, and I'll send you a little gift in terms of trying to improve how you deal with the Party Wall process. Okay, so groups we focus on in terms of the Party Wall Act. You have the building owners, which is basically the people doing extending their own home, doing a rear extension because they need more space. Now, I think I've got some attendees that are dealing with social housing and adaptations where someone goes into a hospital, needs to have a disabled access shower room and so on, so that they're able to come back home. And a lot of the time that's done by having a rear extension. So that's a hybrid between home extension and commercial, although it's their own residential property that the council is sometimes extending. Nowadays, we've also got everyone's working from home. They're realizing that it's a good idea working from home. However, we need more space, so they're looking at loft extensions. So that's quite important for homeowners. Next group is property developers. So this could be doing one refurbishment of just the property, a buy-to-let that bought. They're either doing an HMO or buy-to-let. And it could also range to someone doing big development of several hundred houses on a site. Equally applies to all of those. Next group that needs to be mindful of the Party Wall Act are finance and development companies, whereby they're lending money for developers to develop sites, and because the developers or the builders are forgetting to do the party wall process, it means that their repayment of the loan can be at jeopardy in terms of overrunning delays and returning the finance. So financiers, developers, and need to be aware of the Act. Property investors as adjoining owners. Now, where you're a landlord, so it could be social housing landlord, housing associations, just property investors. They've worked hard to get their property into a very fit state, and nowadays there's legislation is very tough, and the next door are undertaking works, and the owners next door may be reasonable and good people, but it's down to the builder. So the part of the Party Wall Act is protecting the adjoining owner's property angle as well. I'm going to run through that shortly. Now, architects, usually when people look at doing extensions, architects can be a linchpin in terms of how they introduce the Act to people that they're drawing plans for, their clients, and how they are advised in terms of dealing with them. So I'm going to go through a little section on day 3 for architects. So let's get started. I'm going to look at the building owner's perspective of the Party Wall Act. So the Act is actually written in sections. Although it talks about walls, foundations, special foundations, it doesn't actually think about projects in the way that the building owners think about them. So the common types of projects, and I'm going to use residential projects so we can all try and get an understanding of how the Act works. The sections of the Act equally apply to commercial and residential projects. So we've got rear extensions everyone's familiar with. We have loft conversions. Again, removal of chimney. So people always think this doesn't count. This is actually the second most risky project you can do, where you're removing a chimney from the party wall in terms of likelihood of damage. The most risky in terms of likelihood of damage is where basements are being undertaken. That's the type of works that can have the most effect on your neighbours and most likely chances of damage. Porches are a little bit funny and strange. I've always thought, you know, how a porch is going to be notifiable, and we have had porches that are notifiable under the Act, so we're going to deal with those as well. Okay, so the Party Wall Act Act 1996, to give its full title. Our story actually starts in the Great Fire of London, 1666. At those times, the convention of building works or building buildings was to lay the joists from left to right, so that it meant that neighbours' joists were connecting on the party wall. And when the Great Fire of London took place, it meant that because there was timber connecting to timber, the spread of fire was much more prolific, and it meant a bigger problem for London. And that's why, which started in Pudding Lane, that's why the Great Fire of London spread so quickly. And from then on, there's always been a London Building Act of some type around in play. Our story then moves on. The London Building Act then, sorry, this legislation then, the latest version was in London Building Act 1939. I've got a few grey hairs, but I'm not quite that old. So if you want to laugh, you can raise your hands. Now, from the London Building Act 1939, just after the Second World War, we had our Town and Country Planning Act 1947. So a lot of those rules come from there. We're all familiar with planning and the planning procedures. When they brought over planning, they left the element of the Party Wall Act behind, so they didn't bring that over. And on the 1st of July 1997, the Party Wall Act came into force, which is the element of the London Building Act that was left behind. So it's sort of, the other thing that was brought over was, the other element of law was the Building Control Act, building control. So that legislation also comes from London Building Act 1939. Okay. the Party Wall Act applies to England, the whole of England and Wales. There are few minor exemptions, mainly the barristers actually. That's strange how that happened. It doesn't apply to Scotland and it doesn't apply to Northern Ireland. So if you're watching this webinar from for Northern Ireland and Scotland, you're welcome to stay on, but it doesn't apply to they have their own versions. Strangely enough, there is a Dublin Act 1854, but I'm not going to discuss that. That's not what we deal with here. Okay, so the reason for the Party Wall Act is twofold. First of all, it's there to help building owners to build their project. It's not there to stop works. It's there to help them undertake the projects and be helpful. The second element of the Building Act equally is to protect the adjoining owners. So sorry, I'm just making sure everyone can see the screen. Yeah, sorry, just checking you can see the screen. Great. Yeah, so the second element is to protect adjoining owners, protect their property from damage from works being carried out by next door. It's also a dispute resolution mechanism so that disputes can be handled, at least relating to notifiable works under the Act, without having to go to court. So the 96 Act starts roughly in the 80s now. In the 80s, a lot of residential owners discovered that by doing a loft conversion, they could turn a three-bedroom house into a four-bedroom house, or they can get greater living space, and that extending their homes meant there was greater value add. So i.e. the cost of extending a home was less than the value it would add. It'd save them moving. And also there was a heat wave in 1976, which meant a change in the big building regulations where previously foundations were quite low. And that's when the meter 1100 millimeter building regulation specification came in. Now, because of that, it meant anybody doing a rear extension would be digging a lot deeper to the neighbors. With these two factors included, there was a spate of building works going on, and there was a problem there in that the neighbors got worried on how these building works affected their property. So the neighbors were taking people to court, trying to stop the neighbors working, and the government came up with the legislation of Party Wall Act, etc. Act 1996, in terms of stopping people, keeping people out of court, and making sure that courts weren't tied up with this legislation. Okay, the Party Wall Act is an important element of law. So it's like any other law, it has its own space, and just because you get planning doesn't mean you obey the Party Wall Act. So if you think of everything as a box, and every law needs to be adhered to in its own box. So you've got planning, you obviously have to get planning to be able to build, you have to comply with building control legislation, you have boundary disputes, so and that's a different subject entirely. Boundary disputes can be very difficult. Try not to get involved in those. And then when you're doing conversions, you have sound testing, you have fire regs, you have air testing. There's all various legislation that you need to comply with, where you need to put scaffolding up. That's a scaffolding license. Now, there's an interaction between a scaffolding license and Section 1 of the Act. I'll talk about that when I talk about Section 1. Where you're doing a loft conversion within a block of flats, you need to get freeholders' consent, and all of those need to be complied with. With the Party Wall Act, people can get either do a project via planning, or sometimes they can undertake a project via doing permitted development. Now, regardless of whichever they do, they still need to comply with the Party Wall Act. The Party Wall Act is one of these pieces of legislation. It's a bit like health and safety, in that it comes down to the building owners personal responsibility to comply with the Act. You can't delegate this off to an architect or a project manager. The buck will end up coming back to the property owner. So there's a sort of buck stops with the property owner. It applies to all commercial projects and all residential projects, regardless. So, and like I previously said, all across England and Wales. Okay. On average, in a year, about 1 in 42 properties are affected by the Party Wall Act. So that's kind of numbers you're looking at, and where you've got property managers, this gives you a gauge of either you'll be receiving that many notices, you know, depending on your portfolio. So that's the end of that section. I'm gonna go through the process overview now, and go through how the process of the Party Wall Act takes place as an overview. So the basic terms of a Party Wall Act. Now, you've heard me talk about these. I'm going to try and explain these in a bit more detail. So we have the building owner. Now, you only have one building owner, and this is the party, the owner wants to carry out the works. There could be a leasehold owner, so where you've got a flat, they could have the lease of the flat and they want to extend the lease. They want to extend their flat or a shop or whatever it is. There could be a leasehold owner, and there's only one person. It could be a corporate body. So, for example, it could be a limited company, it could be a housing association, there's only one building owner. Now, the reason I say there's only one building owner, on the other side, you've got multiple classes of adjoining owners. So you have the freeholders. Now, you have freeholders. There's always one freeholder of a building, but you could have a scenario where if you're, for example, if you've got terrace property and you've got properties on either side, there's 2 or more freeholders that are notifiable under the Act. So you have freeholders. You also have leaseholders. Now, leaseholders are more than 1 year. So leases of more than 1 year. Now, leases of more than 7 years need to be registered on a land registry. A land registry is where when Party Wall surveyors serve notices, pick up who they need to serve notices to. So they'll look at a land registry and say, well, that's a leaseholder, that's a leaseholder. They need to serve it to the freeholders, leaseholders, and in there, leaseholders of more than 7 years need to be registered. So you have a situation where leaseholders of between 1 and 7 years are sometimes not registered on the land registry for whatever reason, and they're missed out. And this is particularly a situation with commercial buildings. So you'll find shops sometimes have leases of less than 7 years. They don't register on the land registry, so they can miss out. And the only way for that to deal with that is to get the freeholders to pass on any notices and notify the Party Wall or the Party Wall surveyors or the people serving the notices that these guys are also notifiable. We also have a group that's classified as right to receive profits. Now, these come under where you've got a lease purchase option, or you've got a rent to rent, or housing associations sometimes take on leases of more than 1 year. Sorry, that's in the previous section. Beg your pardon. So you've got purchase lease options or contracted. You've got people who have rights to receive profit from land. This could be trusts and so forth. And then the 4th section is where you're contracted to buy land. So this is a scenario where where you've given a notice to your neighbour, and your neighbours to the who's an adjoining owner, and suddenly we've had a scenario where the adjoining owners have rung us up and said, well, actually, I'm not concerned with your works because I'm selling the property. Now, depending on the time scale or how long that your works are going to be, it may be the case that you need to engage the new prospective owners, so that if you're not completing your notifiable works by the time they become owners, there will be notifiable owners. so that you could have a scenario where you're looking to do a loft conversion or a rear extension, send a notice to your neighbors, to the adjoining owners, and they've just exchanged on a house, and the current owner saying, well, I'm not fussed, I'm going to sell the property. But it's unfair on the adjoining owners, because they're the ones that are going to have the property, and also you need to comply with the legislation. And if a party is contracted to buy land, they become notifiable owners. So that's the one to watch out for. It can be quite onerous, and we always try and engage the people who are contracted to buy land as quickly as possible. So that's your best case scenario for doing that. Now, the groups that are excluded are short hold tenancies, and I know there's talk of extending short hold tenancies for three years or something. Not sure how that's gonna pan out, but we'll have some guidance when we get there. Council tenants aren't notifiable, so where you've got a property and it's council tenants are tenants there, that's notifiable. Obviously, the council as the freeholder is notifiable, and mortgage companies aren't notifiable owners. Right, so the party wall process, it started by the building owners. That's stage one. You could think of the party wall process as 2 stages. So it started by the building owners who issue a party wall notice. Party wall notice is not a party wall agreement. So we often get calls from owners saying, we've sent a party wall agreement to our neighbor and they haven't signed it. It's wrong. A, it's wrong terminology, and B, they haven't understood the process. So a notice is not a party wall agreement. It's just how you start the process. It's served by the building owners to start the process. And quite important, and I'm going to address this later on again, do not send it recorded delivery. Send it by certificate of posting via post office in writing. That's the best way, and it's the correct way to serve the notice. Okay, stage 2 is decided by the adjoining owner. So what happens later on is decided by the adjoining owner in terms of the choices they have. They can select a schedule of, there are basically 3 choices. They can select a schedule of condition, which is a photographic survey of their property. It's very similar to when you rent a car. You rent a car and the car hire company takes photographs of your car, which is used as a baseline, so that if there's any scratches or bumps, everyone knows what's happened. So this is exactly the same process, except we're creating a baseline of the adjoining owner's property in case there's any damage. Now, it's important to realize that this element of the process is there to protect the building owners from false and malicious claims. So we've gone into properties whereby we've looked at it and there's cracks in the wall, there's various damage, and it's exactly in the right place where the builders would have put it in, would have created the damage. And we've had to look out and said, have they started work? So this element of the process is there and designed to make sure that the building owners are not ending up having to pay for false and malicious claims from neighbors claiming that there's damage when the damage is pre-existing. The other thing they can ask for is a party wall award. So as an adjoining owner, they can ask for a party wall award. This can be termed as a party wall agreement. It's a legal document which sets out rights and responsibilities of both parties, and it contains various clauses. And the most important one is a dispute resolution procedure in case there's damage. So it saves the adjoining owners having to go to court, and it saves the building owners from having to pay extra legal expenses and get bogged down in legal claims. So that's the end of those 2 sections. We're going to go and have a little message from one of our sponsors. I'm going to see if I can get this tech to work. I did struggle with it the other day, so hopefully, fingers crossed, I can get this to work. So Ranjit, if you can hear me.
Can you hear me, Dil?
Yes, I can hear you, sir. I'm trying to put your video on so we can see you. Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. Okay, so if you start while I'm trying to put your video on, let me see if I can get. I think you need to do it from your end.
No, from your end, I've got nothing on this side showing.
Okay, well, I've got your slide up, so you can just talk through while I fiddle around with the technology.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ranjit from Property Investor News. We've been publishing this for the last 18 plus year. And over the next couple of months, we are coming to our 200th issue. I want you to listen carefully what I've got to say. Education is the only weapon to be successful, no matter what business you're in, and property is no different. Question you need to ask yourself is, am I going through life or am I growing through life? Ask yourself, how much have I grown since the lockdown, and be true to yourself. Time is no excuse at the moment. Prepare yourself for changes, challenges, and opportunities ahead when the lockdown is relaxed. Don't go through life, grow through life. Subscribe to Property Investor News magazine. We do have a special offer for you all today. 3 issues free of Property Investor News and a free book, Before the Hammer Falls, written by 2 industry auction experts. That's Jay Howard and Pure Rusnik. Remember, dig your well before you're thirsty. To subscribe, just follow the instructions in the chat box or the Q&A. Thank you for your time. Please stay safe, stay strong, stay positive, stay home, stay connected, stay online, and take care. Back to you, Dil.
Thank you, sir. Very good. I've actually read the book. It's a great book. We've got another sponsor, and Sam, can you hear me?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I can hear you clearly, yes.
Right, great. Now, Sam's been doing some, I'm going to put his slide on if I can manage it. Now, Sam's been doing some great work in terms of housing tenants, social tenants for local councils. His group does a lot of other stuff, but Sam, if I can just ask you to talk about your social housing project, I think it'll be useful to some of our attendees. So over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Dil. Thanks for the opportunity. It's been a very knowledgeable half an hour. I've learned a lot from your presentation. Yes, Midas Property Group, we, like you rightly said, we do lots of webinars and auction events, but specifically I was talking about social housing. We are normally an acquisition and a sales agency, but with the current situation, we've stepped out of our comfort zone to try and help the councils house a couple of people within Harrow, Brent, Barnet, and Royal Kensington boroughs. So if anyone has a property that is vacant and they're looking for a strong tenant, please don't hesitate to call me. We know after the COVID, we're not sure how businesses will come out of this, but one business that we know would survive and would never go bankrupt is a council. So if the council is renting from you, you know you've got a strong covenant, you've got a strong tenant in place. So still, over to you, and thank you once more for the opportunity.
Sam, at the end of this, hopefully I'll finish about 3 o'clock. We'll go through some of your other services that you offer, but for everyone that's listening, and I know we've got some attendees from local councils, not only is Sam a great guy, but you know, he's helping to house some tenants in this difficult time for everybody. So please feel free to take his details, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to bring Sam on, so that we can all help people who are unfortunate, who need housing. And Sam's doing some really good work. Sorry, Sam, can you say what some of the boroughs you're actually dealing in at the moment?
Yeah, right now we're doing Harrow, Brent, Barnet, down towards Camden as well, and Kensington. So we actually we can cover most of the boroughs north of the river. And by the way, the boroughs are not restricted to where they place tenants. So
Yeah.
if we have a property in Southall, they would send Harrow would send a tenant to Southall that wants to go. Every single borough has over 300 families on their waiting list. So all they have to do is offer the council the property address to the whole database and find out who wants to go to that address. So what they would do, they would send at least 5 potential tenants. It's up to us and the landlord to interview the 5 and select the best fit to the property.
We've got audience from a wider council base, wider geography, and I'm guessing that you would consider working with other councils as well. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes, we've got calls from Haringey, we've got calls from other councils in South London, Croydon, but we like I said, the more if we get more properties, we would actually shout out to more councils and try and support them.
Fantastic. Look, we'll hear back from the rest of your services about 3 o'clock. So I'm on time to finish at 3. Like I said, back to the presentation. Thank you for that. So far it's on track in terms of time. Okay. So resuming back to our party wall content. So let's now look at the adjoining owner's response in more detail. So it's a party wall. This is a process overview. I'm going to go through it quickly. So while you're planning your project, ideally when you've got your first draft ready, and particularly when you're going to do permitted development schemes such as loft, rear extension, it's always a good idea to start drafting your start the party wall process, which starts from a notice. It actually works better where you're doing permitted development schemes to put the notice, to send the notice to your neighbors just before you put the application in. The reason being, if you put the application in, the notifiable owners are going to end up getting letters mail shot in from other party wall surveyors, and which can cause worry for the adjoining owners. It's better to inform them beforehand, which increases the odds of getting a positive response to your notice. So once the party wall process is done, the building work process can start. Now, you can do non-notifiable works, but it's safer to do the party wall process, get it out the way, so that you've got a baseline of the adjoining owner's property, and you've got a baseline of the adjoining owner's property, avoiding any, again, protecting yourself from false and malicious claims. Now, occasionally there's damage, and this is where the party wall process goes into post-works process. That's a different, so that is within the Act, but it's a different process. So the award finishes at the building at being served, and then should there be damage, there's a whole other process in the Party Wall Act that we can go through, that's gone through. So you start the party wall process. You need to analyze your building scheme. Now with standard residential stuff, you're looking out for various things in terms of how far the neighboring property is, the makeup of the neighboring property, whether it's owned by a freeholder, leaseholder, split into flats, or a single house. And those I'm going to go through in day 2 and 3. Once we analyze the property and the neighbors, we send out adjoining owners notices. Depending on their response, they can respond a number of ways, and I touched on this earlier. So they can consent with a schedule of condition. Again, that's where you've got a photographic survey of their property, giving you a baseline. They can ask for an agreed surveyor. They can ask for a party wall award using an agreed surveyor, which is the same as the building owner. Now, Consent with a schedule of condition or an agreed surveyor is actually a win in terms of costs and time for a building owner carrying out works, especially for residential works. The adjoining owner has a right to appoint their own surveyor, and in most cases, not in all the cases actually, and this is where we're going to discuss, or either tomorrow or the day after, in terms of fees. Mostly the fees are paid by the person, the parties doing the works. So adjoining owner has a right to appoint their own surveyor. And in terms of basement complex works, we're actually not allowed to be the agreed surveyor. On most other works, we can be agreed surveyors. So you've got to bear that in mind in terms of, first of all, costings, and secondly, the time scale in terms of trying to complete the works. The fourth option is the adjoining owner cannot respond to your notice. Now, there's a misunderstanding here, and I've heard it so many times from so many property professionals actually that you'd think know better. If you don't get a response to your notice within 14 plus 2 days, it does not mean you can carry on. It's not deemed consent. It's actually the opposite. It's a deemed dissent. So with the schedule of condition, what will happen is we'll make an appointment with the adjoining owner. We'll carry out a survey, largely photographic. We'll create a report with it, and we'll serve it we'll serve the report to both sides. And now, because of GDPR, the photographs are kept on a file. Okay, where the neighbor adjoining owner selects an agreed surveyor option, we make an appointment with them. We carry out a schedule of condition, again, similar process. This time we're creating a schedule of condition report. We're also then writing up a party wall award. That's commonly termed as an agreement. And then we serve that to both sides. So that's the end of that process. So the building owner can then start works. Now here, the adjoining owner can consent to start the works before the notice period has expired. So if we get a cooperative adjoining owner, we can get this done within a week, depending. At the moment, we can't, because we can't go and do surveys. But on a normal process, we can get it done within a week, 3 days sometimes. But there is a statutory notice period. There is a notice period, and that notice period can be decreased and shortened if the adjoining owner agrees. So where the adjoining owners are quite friendly, they can sometimes agree to shorten that. And where they're stubborn, there is that period that they can ask to be agreed for a minimum time. Okay, so if the building owner appoints, where you've got a scenario where each party has its own surveyors, building owner have their own surveyors, the adjoining owner appoints their own surveyors, the first thing the surveyors do is to select a third surveyor. There's a lot of misunderstanding around third surveyors. I'm going to deal with that in a separate section of its own. So that's a term that you need to understand as a building owner, and ideally you should get the details of a third surveyor, because where your surveyors are causing problems, you as a building owner or an adjoining owner have rights to go to the third surveyor and ask them to get this stuff moving. So there's 4 people that can go make a representation to the third surveyor. It's the building owner surveyor, adjoining owner surveyor, the building owner themselves, and the adjoining owner. So it's quite important to understand who your third surveyor is, and you're allowed to ask for that information from your appointed surveyor. So usual convention is adjoining owner surveyor organizes the appointment for a schedule of condition. Building owner carries out the schedule, building owner surveyor carries out the schedule of condition, sometimes and usually accompanied by the adjoining owner surveyor, not always. And going forward, I think we may have some changes there. The building owner surveyor then drafts a schedule of condition report and a party wall award. This is then sent to the adjoining owner surveyor for checking through the schedule of condition, making comments on the award. Remembering the award is a legal document. Adjoining owner surveyor's comments are then responded to, and sometimes there can be a bit of back and forth between the two surveyors. Very similar to how lawyers do it. They're arguing over minor points, sometimes major points, and sometimes the detail of the project. Again, the detail is sometimes in drawings, method statements, and once agreed, the party wall award is agreed by the adjoining surveyor and the adjoining owner surveyor and the building owner surveyor. There's nothing for the owners to sign. Once the two surveyors are appointed, the adjoining owners and the building owners fall out of the equation. Basically, the next thing they'll hear is when an award is served. The other important point to understand is surveyors once appointed can't be rescinded, i.e. they can't be sacked, and also they're actually under a statutory obligation to carry out their duties impartially. So although they have to listen to their representative owner, they can't do their bidding. So if an adjoining owner says to his surveyor, I want you to make sure that project is stopped, he's under a legal obligation to follow the act and not to do that, because all they're there to do is to make sure that the act is adhered to on an unbiased basis. So I've had occasions where the building owners are trying to give me an instruction because they think it's a client relationship. It's actually not. It's a statutory appointment, and I have to do the right thing under the act. It's quite important to understand that. So building owner serves the award to the building owner surveyor serves the award to the building owner in this setup, and the adjoining owner serves the award to the adjoining owner. So the principle behind this is if the two owners don't want to talk to each other, there's no reason for them to talk. However, mostly in residential settings, the idea is to get an agreed surveyor appointed or deal with it under a schedule of condition. Now, the fourth thing that could happen, and happens quite often actually, is the adjoining owner makes no response. Now, this could be a number of reasons, whereby councils are a prime example, not exclusively. It's owned by corporate owners. They're on holiday. They can't be bothered. They're trying to frustrate the process. Adjoining owners believe incorrectly that by not replying, the building owner can't carry on with the project. And going back to my earlier point, the whole reason of the Party Wall Act is to enable building works to take place. So it's structured so that the process is kept moving. Now, part of the reason for the misunderstanding of the 10-4 process is this is one of the things that changed between the 1939 Building Act and the 96 Party Wall Act, in that a non-response previously was taken as a consent, whereas in the 96 Act, it's taken as a dissent. Well, at least for sections 6 and 2 and 3. I'm going to discuss that tomorrow. But if you receive no response to your notice, that's automatically deemed as dissent, i.e. it means the adjoining owner is disagreeing with your notice. So the next procedure is and usually it's the building owner surveyor, then sends a reminder letter to the adjoining owner. This is done after 16 days. This gives the adjoining owner a further 12 days. The Act says 10, but there's an additional 2 days for allowing service of notice via oral mail. So that's why we're talking 16 rather than 14 and 12 rather than 10. So the letter sent, the adjoining owner has 12 days to respond, and depending on what happens next, if there's no response from the adjoining owner, now the building owner should appoint a surveyor on behalf of the adjoining owner. This has two purposes. So it can't be the same surveyor as the building owner under a 10-4 appointment. And as a building owner, it's important you do this. We just had a really interesting situation occur on this, because once a surveyor is appointed, they can't be unappointed. So therefore, as a building owner, what you're doing is you're closing the door to adjoining owner appointing a difficult surveyor. Now, I know surveyors are supposed to be impartial and carry out their duties properly, but we can get difficult surveyors, and also it's the correct way to do the process. You have to appoint a surveyor on their behalf. Of course, within those 12 days, the adjoining owner can go back and can respond with the previous options, i.e. consent with a schedule of condition, use an agreed surveyor, and appoint their own surveyor. So those options are still available. I'm going to go through a quick run through of common types of building works. Now, as I said earlier, the Act is written in sections. It talks about Section X, Section 2, Section 1, Section 6, 6.1, 6.2. And the only people that are interested in section numbers are mainly party wall surveyors. It's quite hard for people to visualize this. So it's quite good to translate that into common types of building works. We've used residential works, but obviously all those sections will also apply to commercial works. So for example, a rear extension is notifiable under usually Section 6.1, occasionally Section 6.2, and sometimes Section 1. Now all of those have a notice period. So in that case, it's 1 month. And the dissent, if there's no reply, that's an automatic dissent. Apart from Section 1, you'll see there, that's one of the exceptions. That's an automatic consent. If you're doing a loft, they're usually notifiable under Section 2/3. That's a 2-month notice period. Again, automatic dissent. Where you're taking out chimneys, it's notifiable under Section 2/3. Again, same section number. Same section, but different subsection numbers, which is detailed. Maybe I'll discuss later on. Again, it's a 2-month notice period. It's again automatic dissent. Where you've got basements involved, those are notifiable under Section 2, probably 6.1, and sometimes Section 6.2. Section 6, Section 2 works a 2 months notice period. Section 6.2 a 1 month notice period. Again, automatic dissent. And finally, porches, those are Section 6.1, 1 month notice period, automatic dissent. And where you're building on the line of junction, I'm going to explain this tomorrow or on the third day, where you've got porches and doing Section 1 works, 1 month notice period, but that bit is automatic consent. So I think I'm doing quite okay for time. That's a run through on the building owner's perspective and relating it to common types of works. Usually we get a question asked by building owners why they should undertake the party wall process. So first of all, reasons for undertaking it, it gives you the ability to undertake a schedule of condition of the neighbouring properties, therefore avoiding false and malicious claims. Now we've had occasions where the project is stopped midstream. So we've had more than one occasion where the builders have ripped the roof off a loft extension, loft conversion, and it's had to stop while we sort out the party wall elements. Now this could be much more serious if you're doing a commercial development where your loans become overdue and overpaid, extended, and beyond the development finance you've arranged. And for financiers, it's not very good to not get their money back, and it creates a problem in the long-term relationship as well. So it's important for those reasons. Not least and mostly of all, it's your responsibility as a building owner. As I said, it's one of these laws that apply strictly, and you can't delegate it out to architects or builders. There's also the reason is to prevent legal action. So once if you don't obey the party wall process, neighbours can take legal action, and that can become a lot more expensive to sort out than doing it properly in the first place. Also, the other issue you can get is you can have building teams on site at a stop, and they're going to cost you money because they can't proceed, and it's your duty to carry out to have carried out the party wall process. Lastly and not least of all, it is the law. It is your duty to comply with it. Okay, that's the agenda for day 2, which is tomorrow. Again, same time, 2 to 3. It'll be good to have you. It'll be good for everyone to be here, and hopefully I can build on today's understanding. And if we use a building metaphor, today's the foundation. We're gonna progress our little webinar training tomorrow. So look, time for some Q&As. Now, I'm going to try and use the technology here, see if we've got Q&As. Okay, right. So first Q&A is, will you be sending a copy of the slides, please? Yep, happy to send a copy of the slides. What I'm going to do is, if you connected to me on LinkedIn, sorry, I've missed something out there. If you connected me to me on LinkedIn, I'll put them on the LinkedIn. Otherwise, if you can send me an email, I'll send out slides. I'm going to try and attach them with the thank you message for attending. I can't guarantee that. I'm not sure if I can make the technology work. Yeah. So got another question. How long is the notice period? So I'm going to take you back to this slide in terms of the notice period. So let's see. So hopefully that's answered that question. Notice period depends on the section number. So section 6 is 1 month, section 1 is 1 month, and section 2 is 2 and 3, and that's where those sections apply. Hi, will there be a recording to watch later? Yes, there will be a recording. We're gonna give Sam a version of the recording once we've tidied it up a little bit, and he'll put it on his YouTube channel. I'm going to bring Sam in to speak in a minute, give you his details. Right, so, okay. Got another question here. This is very interesting. Is there a booklet on the process? Yes, there is a booklet on the process. It's written by the communities, local communities section of local government. It's the one with the red cover and everybody looks at it. Now, I have to be really careful what I say on that because it was written by one of my mentors when it came out. There's a couple of issues with the booklet in that it's very detailed, very good on explanations, but it's sort of, the draft notices aren't very clear and easy to use in terms of simple works, and people who use it sometimes mess it up. And the other thing is it totally ignores the 10-4 process. So that's why we continuously get questions saying, we've had no response, what do we do? We've had no, and that's a reoccurring question. And for ages, I've wondered why that question is asked on a repetitive basis. The reason is it's left out of that red booklet, and I'll bring a photo of it tomorrow. I haven't got one with me to show you, and that's the one everybody refers to. It's issued by the government. So that's the reason for a lot of problems there. Will you be able to touch on boundary garden walls between building owner and private owner? Okay, so you can build a garden wall and it comes under section 1. I'm going to cover that. Also, there's a common misnomer about fences in that it's not always the case that the right-hand side is owned by you and the other one belongs to the other one. That's simply, what's the term here? Custom and practice. That's the usual understanding, but it's not true. Fences and walls can be owned by either side or both. And we've come across, I think Stanmore's an area where you've got estates that are owned, the fence is jointly. Croydon's another section where I've been to, and the fence and the boundary walls are owned jointly, and the owners are jointly responsible. So don't always assume they're owned by X or Y. It should say in your title plans who's responsible for maintaining it. Does this apply to outbuildings, and what section, please? Yes, so it can apply to outbuildings. So where you're building an outbuilding and your neighbors have already got outbuildings, they're notifiable under section 6. if you're going under deeper, your foundations are going to go deeper than theirs. But it depends. So they could have a modern outbuilding that's been constructed recently, and you're going to go to the same depths. So under Section 6, and I'm going to cover this when I cover Section 6, you have two joint tests. So one is you're excavating within 3 meters of their foundation, and it's foundation and it's not the boundary. You need to be clear on that. And also you're going to go to a horizontally lower depth than their foundation. So if you're going to the same depth, it's not notifiable. If you're going to a lower depth and it's within 3 meters, it's notifiable. And if you're going lesser, your foundations are going to be lower, lesser depth than theirs, then it's not notifiable. If they haven't got an outhouse, obviously they haven't got a foundation in their building, there's nothing to notify there. So hopefully that answered that question. And who pays for what? Okay, great question. I'm going to address this on the fees question on day, either day 2 or day 3. Let me just make a little check on that one. Let me just, so yeah, that'll be addressed under tomorrow's session, who pays for surveyors' fees and why, and I'll go through that. So that's that question. Do you feel the RICS party wall legislation and procedure templates are good to use reference when cross-checking with the Party Wall Act? Okay, so RICS is Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. They've got a new 7th edition out, and the award template that's currently used that was previously used was the RICS one, and now they've changed that in terms of they've got a 7th edition. And one of my, actually I know about 3 people that were on the committee that wrote that. So it's really improved, but the issue with, not so much with RICS, is RICS stands for Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. So they deal with, they have 125,000 members, that they're a global organization, and there's about 4,000 surveyors in the UK that deal with party wall issues. So for them, it's a very minor sector, and their focus is on dealing with a whole broad band of issues. They've got a new guide called the RICS 7th edition, and it's quite detailed. It's changed since since the previous version. The new award is a much simpler format. So they're making progress, and the subsection of the RICS element that used to deal with it was known as a P&T club. I'm not currently a member of RICS. I belong to an organization called Faculty of Party Wall Surveyors. All we do is party wall stuff. So for me, if you want to focus on party wall stuff, you want to belong to a specialist organization. And a lot of the RICS members also belong to Faculty of Party Wall Surveyors. So there's a crossover of 2 organizations, and the new 7th edition is a much better improvement. The issue with the Party Wall Act is because it's literally only 21 years old in terms of the extension to England and Wales. There's still case law going on. There's new cases going on. It's been updated by the Communications Act 2015. So it's legislation that's moving along rather than that's totally understood. And there's always misunderstandings because people are used to doing things the old way and they haven't really looked at how they're doing it. So there's various issues there. If 2 properties are owned by the same owner, does the Party Wall Act apply? Yes, that's an interesting question. Well, in effect, no. And you have to be careful. You could have legal owners, and then you could have so you could have 2 properties owned by 2 different legal entities. So you could have two companies owning it, and the owners of the two companies are the same, but it's illegal owners that are being involved here, and it doesn't apply because you can always consent to a notice. So if you own two buildings next to each other, you can consent, and if say family members own the buildings, then you don't have to get into a dispute. So it doesn't apply to that extent. It's not like planning law where you still have to go and get planning law done. So you theoretically, if you're two legal entities, you could issue a notice and consent, and that's the end of it. Yeah. So those are the questions for today. Please keep your questions coming in. That's the end of my presentation for today. I think I've overrun